And try to screw it up less next time, although we can't possibly screw it up as badly as the city is screwing this up. And welcome to the This Week in Worcester podcast. I'm Tom Marino. I'm editor of This Week in Worcester. I'm here with Mr. John Edward Keogh. He is the executive producer of Managing Media. He is the president of Hollywood Film Group and a contributor to This Week in Worcester. Hi, John.
Hello, sir.
Well,
how are you today?
Tardy. And while I love to blame that on you, it is 115% on me. I was at a thing today, and missed the preferred window to leave. So here we are late, and I apologize to those who were waiting, including you, Mr. Keogh.
Sorry. Yeah, it wasn't my fault.
Kind of a slow week-ish. As every year when budget time comes around, the exciting news kind of, at least out of City Hall, grinds to a halt as we talk about numbers and basically do what the city manager told the city council to do.
Yeah. This is, I guess, for our watchers, listeners, readers, people who pay attention. I think this is probably one of the most important times of the year. And this is really what separates, people who are really informed about the city and what's happening, what's going on versus the rest of folks, which are very often making decisions on, not that they're not, it doesn't make them dumb or doesn't make them not able to process the information. They're just not consuming the information. And because they're not consuming the information, they make decisions on who they vote for based on incomplete data, right? That doesn't mean that they don't have the right to still vote for who they voted for. They do. There's no rule that says you have to be an informed voter. But I would find that that's the best way to vote, is when you kind of know, because then when you know more, you can at least in some form hold them accountable. At the local level, you could talk to them. You can actually have a conversation with the mayor. He's all over the place. You could meet a city councilor. They have a lot of neighborhood meetings that you could go to. There are many ways to engage with them. And I think one of the ways that we've kind of lost for the city is that very few of us engage with the budget process, other than Tom and I. In fact, as we've seen so far, Tom, the city council itself doesn't really engage with the budget process. They have made zero recommendations, at least in the finance committee part of this process, to change the budget that the city manager has presented to them in any way, shape, or form. There's very little critical feedback. There's a lot of questions, but there's very few things that seem to be that you could call critical review or oversight of this budget, other than to support certain pet things and to talk about certain pet things. But very few actual questions are being asked, and the vast majority of the oversight taking place is being done by just a handful of counselors. There's a few issues that you see counselors engage on, as George Russell this week on his yearly crusade for some reason to hammer Discover Central Mass, and then Kate Toomey's every single year response that the staff at Discover Central Mass are amazing and wonderful in all kinds of ways. There are reasons for both of them that we could really dive into. related to staffing and different things. But I think that that's what our city is missing, is really engaging on these deep dives on where to, where the money should be going. Where is the money going? We've had a few people ask us about the way that they do their accounting, right? Like what happens to the parking tickets is something one of our regular watchers and listeners is asking last week. So what happens to that money? And the way accounting is done in the city of Worcester, there is no way to track it because it just goes into the general fund. So it's not like the parking ticket money goes directly into some specific thing. It just goes into the general fund. It's mixed with all the other general fund monies, and then it's spent out of that general fund. There's very few. Worcester's planning government is set up. There's very few designated funds in our city. And if anybody wants to engage on what a designated fund is versus a general fund, a designated fund is usually when money is set aside for a specific purpose. People who have nonprofits know what that means. If someone donates money to you directly, you're supposed to use it for that thing. Most designated funds for the city come from the state and federal government. So the money comes from the state for something specific, like, I don't know, let's say a gazebo, and you have to spend it and make that gazebo. And so there's not that there's any gazebos being built that I know about this year. But I think that a lot of people, Tom, the reason that this is like a quiet time in politics is that, one, the press shuts down around this time. The Telegram and Gazette stops really engaging, and has for years and years and years. There's really no other local political media other than us and Manny. And Manny's role really shifts in the summertime to the community role, because the politicians start going on vacations and they become super less accessible during the summer anyways, so it's harder to engage with them directly. Although the new superintendent, there's going to Manny's interviewing him coming up at some point in the next couple of weeks, but there's just not a lot of responses because a lot of them are going on vacation, and so their kids are getting out of school, and all the high schoolers are out right already. I think the last graduation is Wednesday for any of the high schools in Worcester. South is at DCU, I think. That's Wednesday. There might be another one, but not that many left.
Yeah. So, admittedly unprepared, what is it that you want to talk about within the budget?
Okay, so so one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the overall broad concept is that we, as a city, we elect the city councilors. Specifically, part of their role is to engage on the budget, right? This is, and it might be their most important role, but it has not been that way, I would say, for at least the 20 plus years that has been the O'Brien, Augustus, Batista triumvirate of city managers, where they create the budget, they design the budget, and then the city council just kind of yes knows the items. There's very, very little pushback. In fact, if you go back in that time, I think at one point, Tom, you had written something talking about how many items or how much money had ever been taken out of the budget over the last 20 years, and I think it's just a handful of times. And that's something that has always struck me. It's like, it's very rare that the job that they're there to do, they actually do. It's very, very, very rare. And that is something that I think that when you see the responses, for example, earlier this year when they really released how they were going to spend the ARPA money on charitable foundations here in the city, there's a lot of negativity, right? Because it's usually going to the same group, right? Mechanics Hall, Hanover, blah, 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 blah. All the big people still get the same money that they've always gotten. And then the smaller organizations don't get any. And here's why. Here's why. So just so you understand it, the bigger nonprofits right now are lobbying the city manager. Like day after day, week after week, they are pushing for some part of this money. And it's not just in direct conversation with him. It is in constant engagement with the city departments. And I don't know if people realize how much a long-term city government can have an effect. This is not a negative thing. I'm not preaching a conspiracy here. But if for example, and this is imaginary, I'm not trying to point out anybody, because God forbid Tom and I ever do analysis without someone taking it personal, right? So if, for example, you had an imaginary goose department here in the city of Worcester, right? A
Not
goose
chickens,
department.
not chickens, goose.
A goose department, and you had a and you had the commissioner of geese and geese related things in the city of Worcester. And let's just say that person had been in the job for on and off various capacities for 20 years. The person who was the commissioner of geese, maybe they started off as a low level goose poop scooper and worked their way up to commissioner of geese and all geese things related. Okay, so let's just say that that's how it is. At the same time, over that 20-year period, there are organizations that have existed in the city of Worcester. And those people have had similar trajectories. So let's just say there was a museum of geese, a private institution, nonprofit that happened to operate in the city of Worcester. And you had a low-level janitor start at that museum and work their way up to director of said museum. They have engaged with the commissioner of geese for 20 years on and off, and they have an inherent relationship capital advantage over the new, duck museum that just opened, recently. So you have to look at it in that light. So I know that's like a silly example, but it's very, very true. As Tom has pointed out with the police department, the same thing applies for the rest of the city. It is impossible, it seems, to fire anybody who works for the city of Worcester unless they do something so extravagantly bad that it makes international news. And even then, it's not always the case that you could get them out of the school system. I'm not talking about anybody in particular, but let's just say let's just say someone did something really weird, they might still be invited to read books to children. So those kind of things happen in the city of Worcester and have happened for decades. And part of the reason is because we're not engaging right now. I've been to the first two finance committee meetings, and I'm going to the third on Tuesday. And I will say that the general public, to your discredit, you are completely unengaged from this process. And the city councilors are doing what the city councilors have done for many decades, and they are mailing it in. Right? It is a process to get through. It is a process to just be done. And now I recognize that there are a group of councilors that would love to have meaningful oversight, but I'm talking about the majority of the city council. Their intention is to get through this process, to ratify this budget with no meaningful change, no true meaningful oversight, and the operation of the city of Worcester will continue as it is through the next fiscal year. Now, how does that affect this year's upcoming elections? Well, the big thing is that this is what we elect them to do, is we elect them to manage the city, to, not necessarily have the power of the purse like Congress has at the national level, but they do have the ability to tell the city manager yes or no, like as in we'll replace you if you don't do so, right? That's their big stick that they carry, is they could just replace the city manager. But because it's been narrowed down to just that, it basically means that the only way that they could truly get change in the budget is they'd have to threaten to fire him on every item. And no municipal body is going to work well if every single item is the threat of firing, right? That's not going to function. It'll be just like, well, you did the first 17 things, but you're not going to do this thing, so we're going to fire you. That's not going to function well. And so this really is the root of the frustration that the petition going around to remove City Manager Batista or ask or have him replaced, is talking about, and many other people who talk about it online and talk about it in a lot of these neighborhood meetings, a lot of frustration that's been expressed, in various capacities, is because there is no real oversight of the city manager, because even our elected officials really aren't doing it. And so here's where it is. And so when we get to the point where the budget has been passed to the city council, there is nothing really effective from public hearing, right? So when we get up there, you and Tom and I will be up there to say things, and we'll talk about specific items on the budget, but that's only one voice. And even if 75 people in a row got up and said, I don't know, for example, they wanted to get rid of the ShotSpotter contract, Tom, how big of a chance would it be, even if every citizen in the city of Worcester got up to that microphone on June 10th and said, we don't want this item? What are the chances that would actually happen?
0%.
0%. And that's very, very true, because these things are long, already written in stone. It's hard to really accuse people of like corruption, but there's no meaningful public conversation about these contracts, right? Where that would actually be changed. All of these things are being decided very much behind closed doors. That's just how Worcester operates, right? And so how you would do that is that there's only two ways. One, you could just continue to have public outcry where we on a regular basis, we cover it, we talk about it, we go there, we express ourselves, and then you vote people out. Or the other way is to engage with people, specifically the city councils, on particular budget items. Now, Tom and I in this show, even when we go on really, really long, and I piss off Tom and he yells at me for 3 hours, even when that happens, we don't have enough time to cover the budget. We just don't. We just don't. And so since our chat, since one of our regular listeners, well, let you respond to that, Tom, before I start talking about ShotSpotter and why I think there needs to be meaningful conversation about it.
There needs to be meaningful conversation about a lot of things, and we get meaningful conversation about very little. I'm wishy-washy on ShotSpotter, admittedly. I do think it has some value. It does some things really well. It does other things not as well as, or at least it would appear that they may not do things. ShotSpotter is a very litigious company, so let me phrase this properly. It would appear, based on studies, various studies, that some of the things it says it does has not come to fruition in some municipalities. How's that for a parsed? But I do think it has some value, so I'm not as steadfastly against it in principle. The conversation we're not having is it worth the money we're paying? And that's the conversation that nobody seems to want to have. I think it was Councilor Bergman said that he has constituents that he's aware, or there are constituents that he's aware of that this brings them some sort of peace of mind, or they're supportive of it for whatever reason. And I think that data should drive that decision, and not what people feel per se. I mean, it's a consideration that there's constituents that support it, but I don't think that should be the end all be all. So it's certainly worth further analysis. It should be a kind of a constant thing. I mean, look, if you're trying to get better, you're constantly analyzing, the systems and the tools that you have. So if you want to be better, then you would analyze this. And it doesn't seem like there's any what am I looking for? Any interest in doing so in any meaningful way.
Right. So at the finance committee meeting, there was a little conversation between, first of all, Councilor King had an order that he asked for a report on the good or bad data. He made a comment, like an offhand comment, which basically was like, related to that statement about the neighborhood people. He said they shouldn't rely on ShotSpotter for safety. right? Because both Councilor Bergman and Councilor Merrill Carlson made comments that people in their constituency told them that ShotSpotter makes them feel safer. So I want to address that. I really would like to meet the people who think that, because I find that to be nonsensical. I really truly do, because one, ShotSpotter is a box that detects sounds, and so if you look up and see a box and you feel safer in your neighborhood, you're not really paying attention, because the box can't stop crime. It doesn't stop crime. It doesn't. It detects sounds that might be related to guns, might be. But the data specifically that says, I put a study in the chat that was done by the MacArthur Justice Center. Now, the reason I picked the MacArthur Justice Center is because the MacArthur Justice Center is a radically conservative group. Their board of 11 has 6 pretty prominent Republican funders, and then 5 other people. It is not, when I say radically conservative, I mean conservative for the city of Worcester, right? So MacArthur, we would consider them to be like super right of center. I did not pick like PPI, Prison Policy Institute. I didn't pick I didn't pick the Carnegie Group. I didn't pick any of those groups that are traditionally associated with the Democratic Party, right? So the MacArthur Center intentionally doesn't associate with a political party, so that's why I picked them as the study that I chose. There are a bunch of studies, both right and left, that indicate that that ShotSpotter as a technology is basically nonsense. And I'll give you a couple of things. You can check out the study yourself. But the takeaways: this was done over 21 months, from the period of July 1st, 2019 to April 14th, 2021. This report was the basis for Chicago beginning to review the changes that they made in relation to ShotSpotter. Okay, and so over that period of time, 88.7% of alerts didn't result in police reporting an incident with a gun. The entire purpose of it now. So that means less than 12% of all calls over that period of time were the ones we want to look at, right? 86% of reports there was no crime at all. At all. There was no crime. There was nothing. There was nothing that happened at all. So that means 40,000 times over a 21-month period in the city of Chicago, which is much bigger than ours. Much bigger than ours. It resulted in a dead-end deployment. So officers went to a place that a sound was detected. They found no evidence of a crime. They found no evidence of a gun. They found no bullet casings. They found no witnesses. They had a report, and that was it. 40,000 times in a 21-month period. Almost all of the ShotSpotter boxes are heavily deployed based on census-based crime maps that indicate street-level crime in certain neighborhoods. Now, there's a big argument over this. I tend to lean towards that poor neighborhoods, and I'm staying with poor. I'm not going to go to the racial stuff here. I'm just going to focus on economic status. Poorer neighborhoods, historically speaking, in the United States, are over-policed and heavily patrolled. I don't know that anybody can argue with that. It's when people are poorer, they're more likely to encounter the police. That's just a fact, an aggregate fact that you would have hard time dealing with. So now, that doesn't mean that the same crimes that have been found in those neighborhoods are happening in the, I guess, white-collar neighborhoods, right? Or the more affluent neighborhoods. But it's just to say that there's no way to know what kind of crime that could be being detected if this same box was deployed universally, right? So it by its very nature, it's a limited technology. Okay, it's limited to the places it's deployed, and it's limited to its ability to determine precisely what the sound is versus what the sound isn't. Okay, so the argument for this technology is that it has led to people finding guns and taking guns off the street. Okay. But according to the same study, ShotSpotter only is about 2.2 seconds faster than the argument that Paul Saucier has made about the person who made the phone call in and the wider area that they have to detect. So now 2.2 seconds in a gun-related incident is an eternity. Someone can die in 2.2 seconds. So I'm not saying that there isn't an argument to be made, but the question is that it costs X amount of money. Is the money that we're spending saving lives? Now, Mayor Petty made a statement which I think really shows the disconnect of our city leadership from real life incidents versus statistics. And he gave the chief credit for there being less guns and less murders at this point this year versus last year. But that is a 1,000,000% subjective statistic. There is nothing that the chief of police can do to prevent crime. Even ShotSpotter is a responsive technology. It responds to things. It doesn't prevent anything. So even when we do use it the right way, it's to get things that have already happened, not to prevent something new from happening again. Now the argument would be then that we have to include in our statistical analysis the potential crime that could have been committed with the gun that was found. So if out of 100 calls, I don't know that that's true, Fred, because you can't prove that without putting boxes into every neighborhood. I don't know that that's true. And I would argue that if you included the statistics for neighborhoods where there's hunting, that's probably not true. So that's such a big generality, and it shows again your and many other people's lack of education and a willingness to not think critically about specific issues. And this is a super specific issue. Now, if we take it back out for a second and look at the conversation, Councillor Bergman made the statement that we should rely on Chief Saucier's expertise in this area, that he's an expert. The problem is that his expertise is tainted. It's tainted because he once interviewed for a job with this company. And so that in and of itself is something you have to view as a journalist, right? As a journalist, you have to take into account this person is a municipal employee, and his job is the chief of police. Before he was the chief of police, he advocated heavily for ShotSpotter and for other technologies, including the crime unit, the drone program, and other things. And then he also, when he didn't think he was going to become chief, he interviewed for a job with this company. And now it didn't go anywhere, right? So which he's talked about that publicly. That job did not happen. But the fact of the matter is that he likes this company so much that he once applied to be working there. And so now there are other companies that do the same thing. And so don't you know that our chair of public safety, Kate Toomey, came to the rescue to make sure to defend ShotSpotter and say that, well, these other companies, they don't do it the same way. Well, where's she getting that? Where is she getting that? That's why a meaningful public conversation should be held. Now, ShotSpotter, when it was deployed, there was never in our city real meaningful community engagement on this issue. It was held at the city council level, maybe, and it was really held in conversations behind closed doors. That's just the way it is. Eventually, it was deployed. There really was no controversy at their level. There was just people that were concerned about it. And I would argue that the amount of money that we're spending, and by the way, that came up, that it's going to cost more, and that the accounting department has already put a contingency in place because they anticipate that when the contract ends later this year, that there will be costs that will go higher because of natural costs going higher. So that's really what. Now, I'm not arguing. This is not my entire theoretical framework for this conversation. Is not against the technology. It's against the idea that we can't talk about it. That is a problem because they're elected to listen to us, the people of Worcester. They're not elected to just become salespeople for a company. And again, that does not have any meaningful proof that it has stopped crime. Right, there is no meaningful proof. Now, during the Biden administration, there was a several year the last 2 years crime went down. Oh yeah, time. I'm sorry, I've been talking for a long time. And so far during the Trump administration, which ShotSpotter had increased deployments starting in January, the first quarter of this year, by almost 20%, crime has gone up. So what? Can we make a meaningful connection to that? I don't know that we can.
No. So, I mean, I don't think that. I don't think anybody's trying to sell that this thing stops crime. It doesn't.
Well, the mayor gave him credit for it.
Well, yeah. So that, I mean, I think that's. I mean, it was done in the context of this conversation, but I think that that's something that happens all the time. Is, oh well, good job because crime went down. A good job because there's less shootings. Police go catch people who commit crimes. Crimes are committed, and then they're going to go get the bad guy. That is the overwhelming majority of what they do. There is some crime prevention techniques, but I mean, it's a small part of what they do. Because, you know, if you're law enforcement, you're not, you know, preemptively. It just doesn't even make any sense. Doesn't even. That's not what they do. Just a couple things though. I believe that if I remember the story correctly, I don't think that interview ever happened. I think he was thinking about leaving, inquired about a job there. There was interest. They were going to interview, and then the interim position happened. So I don't think that interview actually happened.
No, it did. He wanted to be interviewed.
Yeah. And you know, that's fine. He was advocating for this company before. His argument is that they've been, and I think he made it during the budget hearing, but you know, they've been doing it longer. They have more resources. They're a big company, et cetera, which are, you know, that's fine arguments. The really objectionable thing that happened, and I think you were getting to this though, is that Councilor King wanted a report using not just sources favorable to ShotSpotter, which is what he asked for. You know, he wanted to use data from other municipalities, you know, studies from a range of places, not just, you know, basically what council gets a lot of, which is sales pitches in the forms of reports. And that was seized on by some in the council to say, you know, he's looking for a negative outcome. I don't understand. He asked for a report. And there's just no interest really from the majority of the council of making any data-based decision on the efficacy of ShotSpotter in Worcester. There's just no interest. You know, it can help response times. In what it is pretty, at least as far as I've seen, pretty universally reviewed, that ShotSpotter is really good at identifying where these sounds are taking place. So that can lead to, if you have a victim there, if you have somebody who's suffering from a gunshot and you know where that takes place, that can lead to a faster response time for that person. You know, whereas if somebody calls that in, you know, because of just acoustics, that could really be anywhere. Could be within a half a mile or more radius of where the person hears it. Could be, you know, it's really a crapshoot of where the thing took place. And that's all positive things. But again, I'm all for, is this like, let's come up with how we view this thing, the value that this provides, and see if we're getting bang for our buck here. You know, how often is it, you know, it has the potential to save lives, but, you know, it's been in the city now 10 years more, I forget. And, you know, do we have at least case studies of that happening? And then how many of them are there? And, you know, let's make a judgment of if we're paying, you know, a significant amount of money for and what we're getting for that. And that was, I think the objectionable thing to me is that they didn't want to do that.
Right. And they, in the conversation, and he has been talking about this since before he became the full-time chief, is they cited a study by the company Sound Thinking. Sound Thinking is ShotSpotter. They just
Right.
changed their name to Sound Thinking. So they cited a study by the company itself. And in the citing of that study, Tom, Chief Saucier, when he was still interim chief, signed a letter that was directed at Elizabeth Warren, Ed Markey, Presley, and a couple other things. It was an open letter signed by 11 chiefs or former chiefs, including William Bratton. So William Bratton, former police commissioner for Boston, New York, and Los Angeles, is of course a massive shareholder in which company? Sound Thinking. So of course, having a letter signed by a shareholder is a big, big problem right off the bat for me. But citing a study from the company itself that doesn't actually give any meaningful data when it means that we need an additional piece of information from somebody not connected to the company. So when Councillor King asks for a report, it is a report to counterbalance. So Councillors Bergman, Merrill Carlson, Mayor Petty, and Councillor Toomey all cited the chief's citing of that report. That to me is a broken communication cycle. They are not reading any studies outside of what the company is providing to them and giving real critical feedback, which to me is a disqualification for whether I would vote for that person or not. You need to be willing to at least engage with the information. So then Councillor Bergman asked for it to be pulled out, which he has the right as the councillor to do, and then made a motion to file. The motion to file under our rules becomes the governing thing. And of course, the majority of 6 does whatever Mo tells them to do, and they voted to file the item. So now then there was a second separate item that was then brought up, which was to do an accountability review within the city, not ask for an outside report, but somehow the city manager would do some accountability review, which then Councillor King inexplicably abstained from, and the majority voted for that. So now there's the city manager is now going to do an internal review. So we already know what that internal review is because the chief of police gave it.
Right.
It's based
Right.
on the company
Right.
report. So the city manager can't possibly come up with something than his own chief of police, who he has now defended publicly and has said is the best possible person for this job. He can't come up with something different than he said, right? And so we don't, again, the citizens of Worcester are done a disservice by the majority. But in this case, this particular case, Councillor Bergman, who basically eliminated the ability for there to be any other voice. And this, to me, is a significant problem. Now, he wasn't the only one, so I'm not just blaming Councillor Bergman. But why can't we, as the people of Worcester, know more information about the companies that are receiving our tax dollars? And for those of you who think that this isn't a problem, why are you okay with spending our tax dollars and not knowing more information? What's so wrong with requesting a report? By the way, it's not that you necessarily have to pay for it, Tom, because there's dozens and dozens and dozens of studies. Again, I picked the MacArthur one for our listeners because they just happen to be the more conservative, and they have a bunch of police officers that work there. So I thought maybe that one would be the more likely one to look at. And they came to the conclusion that it's not an effective tool. So I just don't know. I don't understand this, is what I guess what I would be my thought. I just don't get
it. Sarah, if it does, so I'll just put it on the screen. It doesn't, but what if it's a small handful? I don't think that's the question, though. It's if that money was used elsewhere, what effect would it have, right? So if you say, I forget what the number is. It's like, I think the 5-year is I forget what the cost is. It's $1 million or something a year. I don't remember exactly what it is. And if that was, for example, pick an issue, right? If that money was allocated instead to supporting services for homeless, how many lives would that save, right?
Right.
Maybe that's not the perfect example. Just the first thing I thought. All right. So, if that $1 million is put into a program within the schools, is that less kids committing crimes? whatever it might be, right? You can think of a million scenarios of if that money was moved elsewhere, how would it be effective, right?
How about to detect where all the guns come from instead of the bullet shots at the end, which is almost always by a younger street level user of a gun versus where the guns themselves come from.
So yeah, I mean, whatever it might be. So it's not at least to my mind, it's not like, oh, how do we scratch this $1 million from the whatever it is from the budget? It's is this the most effective way to use that money?
Yeah, and again, I'm not even advocating for ShotSpotter to go away. I am advocating that if ShotSpotter is going to exist, it should be applied fairly to every neighborhood in the city. That's what I am saying. It doesn't make sense that it's only heavily located in one area. It should be in all areas. And the same constituents that Mo has said is happy that it's in certain neighborhoods, I wonder if there are other constituents that would be upset if it was installed in theirs. And that's a huge point, and that really tends to be about the racial component of the neighborhoods that that you find these boxes in. To me, if you're going to have a detection system, it should be equally applied in every neighborhood in the city, at the same distance, and of course, then you would have a much more clear data, pool. Now, of course, what the argument will be is that there's not that many crimes over there, and so the sounds that happen at those boxes versus the sounds that happen at these boxes are more likely to be not gunshots. That's what they'll say, right? And then so they're going to be wasting deployments. But again, the statistics show that almost 90% of all deployments are wasted anyways. So what is the meaningful difference between neighborhood placement? The argument then becomes
several $1 million. Yeah,
huh?
$several million. $several million. I mean, look, I can't argue that we're talking about the how effective using this pot of money is, and then say we should use more of that money to put it in neighborhoods where there's not the same number of shootings.
But that's not. But so no, you keep no. You can't go skip past the same number of shootings, because that's not a data point you can argue from, because you don't know that. You don't know that. You have no empirical data to support that without there being the same amount of detection everywhere. You don't know for sure, right? You just know that generally speaking, reported cases happen in these neighborhoods, right? But we don't know anything about unreported cases. And that's because these boxes are not heavily in white neighborhoods. They're not. They're in specifically historically over-policed neighborhoods. There's no one who disputes that, including this chief of police. He's talked about
I get that. What I'm saying though is, I mean, we do know when people get shot, or especially killed, because they don't move when they get killed, or they're shot. I mean, we know where shootings that result in victims happen, at least. And so I think that to put them in areas where they would be even less, they would be less effective, or I guess their value, the return, the ROI would be smaller, to then put them in those neighborhoods just to make, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And just to be clear, yes, these things are, I mean, this has been, I think there was last year, a year before, there was some leak from inside Sound Thinking about where, a lot of cities where these places are. And yep, there's certainly a racial component to it. But there's also a socioeconomic component to it. And, the real question is, why are, non-white people so heavily represented in these socioeconomic areas? Because the link is not color, but it is economics is the link to crime.
No, I think that, so here's where you and I really disagree. That statement that economics and crime are related is a rich person's thought process that has been presented to our nation for 100 years. I don't know that that's true. That has led to get tough on crime, more prisons, more guards, more police officers, more guns, more ShotSpotter, more body cameras for 75 years. The argument is that poor people need to be policed heavier because they commit more crime. But that is not true. It's just weighted heavily in their direction, as if street level crime or crimes of violence are almost always perpetuated by poorer people. That's only because we focus our policing on them, and we have 100% a recent example of why that's not true. In the Eureka Street incident, Tom, the ICE officers did commit 2 crimes that are blatant and on camera. Crime number 1, they kidnapped a baby. They took a child and they forced the child to stay in a car, and the child was not allowed to move. A teenage girl and then an adult woman. They were told they could not leave the car until the mother came. None of them were charged with a crime. None of them were on the warrants that were ever issued. None of them were on the paperwork with the ever issued. They were used as bait. That is not only something that I can report, it's something that they have admitted in a press release. That is the crime, the elements of kidnapping. Tom, have any of them been arrested?
Oh, no. God, no.
So that means that kidnapping is now not in our violent crime statistics. We have evidence of a crime that has not been even investigated, let alone prosecuted. So all the crime statistics that people cite all the time are missing a massive data pool, and that is selective enforcement. Selective enforcement. When you decide that someone's crime isn't a crime you're going to even investigate because they are of the same social economic class as you, maybe of the same racial class as you, maybe they know you, maybe they're related, maybe they're an officer of, maybe they're a young son, daughter, brother, mother, sister of another officer. Maybe they work for the city manager's office. Maybe they got drunk at a bar in the city of Worcester and stumbled and broke in a window, and they work in the communications department in the city of Worcester and never got prosecuted because the officer on duty knows who they are. Maybe things like that happen all the time. So then you cannot make the argument that more crime happens in those neighborhoods. You only can make the argument that more investigated crime happens in those neighborhoods, because we know, at least with that one incident, that law enforcement in our city makes selective enforcement decisions. That is a fact.
Sure.
And so then none of these data arguments are true data arguments unless you collected all of it. That's my point. So
I think that's certainly all relevant arguments for, so-called victimless crime. When you have, a person injured or, property damaged or whatever it might be, I think that's a tougher argument to make. As far as like drug arrests and like, stuff, people doing their own thing and getting arrested for it, and there's no victim of that crime. I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah. So I would say that some of the white collar crime that's not prosecuted does have victims. And it does have victims because the victims are perpetually forced into lower socioeconomic, situations where they are over policed and subject to more street level crime. So because other people aren't prosecuted and they don't have to feel the effects of what that prosecution does to their life, their family, and everybody else, they're unfairly disadvantaged. This is not. I don't know that anybody ever argues with me about the fact that this is happening. They only argue the outcome. It's the outcome that is the point. And so it's at the end of the argument. It's that when the thing is deployed, well, should we spend more money? Oh, you've already spent the money and you're already making sure you're locking up all the black kids who get caught with guns. Cool, I get it. Right? Now we have a safer city, right? Our city's safer because we lock up young black men. Okay, cool, I got it. You know what I mean? That's the general argument. And so, and I'm a white guy. I'm a white guy. So like, I recognize what I'm saying being, like I would lose validity because of who I am. But I'm making that argument on purpose, Tom, because this shows that all of the problems that the technology is solving is caused by the system. So the system itself still needs more significant oversight. And so they don't even let us have a report about the device that they're using to perpetuate the conditions of the system.
Yeah. So, I mean, we get to the same conclusion that, preventing the report from happening with, data that council hasn't seen before, as we look at an upcoming, and that's the thing here, that's the trigger here is, we're looking at renewing of that contract. So now's the time to judge its efficacy. And apparently we're just going to, just sign whatever they tell us to sign.
Right. And that's really the problem. Again, I'm still not arguing against the program. If it's going to make us safer, and you can show that universal deployment would make us significantly safer, great, awesome. I don't want people to die. I would like people not to die. But I don't know that that's true. I don't know that they can prove that. So therefore, I would like more information. And that is the job of the city council. And we have a majority of city councilors now who literally voted not to do their job on Tuesday.
No, they didn't want more information because they were afraid it would contradict the position that they take.
That's correct. That's correct.
I just wanted to make a different point about the budget.
Yeah.
We always hear that, oh, well, like 60% of the budget is the schools. Not exactly. So when you take the total allocation to schools, which is $523 million, but 420 of that comes from the state, and specifically education aid. So the city is essentially paying $103 million of that 523. And if you take the public safety, just the fire department and the police department, that's 112, about nine and some change more than what the city's contribution to the schools is. And I just did that I just simply subtracted the total education, allocation to education that's in the proposed budget from the city manager, and just subtracted it from the amount of state aid, which gives you the 103. So it's always this narrative that, education is this bane of our existence on the budget. It's just not true. It is a significant portion of the budget, sure, but it also has hundreds of employees. I mean, what we get for that $103 million is outrageous, because the state is going to put in 420 this year. So just comparing that to the two biggest agencies outside of the school department, the police department and fire department, you combine those, you get it's about $9 million more, but about 8 or 9% more. So this idea that it's just education weighing us down and why we can't do all the things we want to do, it's nonsense. It's just nonsense.
No, I'm with you. I think that the way that they view the budget, the Elm Park. We talked a little bit about the Elm Park playground, right? How they view the budget is very much evident in how they handle that situation, right? So it's like you had a bunch of people in the Elm Park neighborhood. I know this because my office. In fact, this window right here, if you just go to the right, Elm Park is right there. Okay, so I walk in Elm Park literally every day, sometimes more than one time per day. I walked there earlier today. Leanne went for a walk with me today, which was nice. And I love the park. I love the ponds, the bridges. I like the geese. I walk there by myself all the time, sometimes at night, sometimes in the morning. And I just love Elm Park. It's a jewel in the city of Worcester. Several families that use the playground have brought up injuries to their children at the older playground, which was more than 15 years old in its deployment, right? It was initially started 15 years ago, and then 10 years ago they did a major replacement of all the stuff, but then it really hasn't been updated since then. I will say this, the maintenance department is great. I know this because I walk in the park all the time. So I watch them take out the trash, which there's trash bins in Elm Park. So they regularly take out the trash. They regularly are cleaning up the walkway from people. You can come see me whenever you want. Come walk with me. They pick up when people throw plastic water bottles and stuff. Just the other day, because the ponds have risen because of all the rain, they're much more full this year than they have been in the last couple of years. The maintenance guy was in the pond with his little slickers up to his waist, picking out stuff. So Tom, I would say that's an important budget thing, right? You should clean up the park and keep the park looking nice. That's great.
Mhm.
And then the playground that they built, you want them to rebuild the playground and make it safer for kids. And I can see it. But it's June 1st, right? And we got that announcement in March that they were going to shut down the park, right? And it wasn't going to be open until July. And many of us expressed concern that it wasn't going to be open until July. And I can tell you today that that it's not finished yet and doesn't look anywhere close to being finished. And I can also tell you that they're splitting the company that's rebuilding it. They're splitting their staff because they're doing 2 playgrounds at the same time. Now, I'm sure there's something to do with deployment about like equipment and people, right? I get it. I understand. But if you really wanted to do that and it was really a priority, wouldn't you put all staff in place and get it done as fast as you can, right? They don't view the budget that way. As universally in the city, they do not view the budget that way. They don't make priorities. They try to manage issues when people complain. And it's usually neighborhood based, right? Because the pothole thing, which is in our chat, we know from every year that District 4's potholes are never fixed. ever. And Councilor Rivera and now Councilor Louis Ojeda have made that argument. Why is their neighborhoods regularly not have their potholes fixed at the same time as you see other potholes being fixed? And the answer is they don't view the budget as egalitarian. They view it as city manager priority based. Whatever his priorities are, whoever it is the things that get done first.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's probably the case in any governing system. That's not just a thing here, right? Because, I mean, that is, well within the purview of the executive to make those, to create those directives. I might have talked about this last week, too. Another thing that just really pisses me off, frankly, about the budget process is this city council, their budget comes up. It's peanuts. And they just go, no questions, no comments. They just go, okay.
And now you and I have talked about this. The lawyer thing is in there again. It's in there. There's an item in there for legal representation for the city council. It's in there. And it was in there last year, and then it got taken out at the last second, right? I remember if we had this conversation, it ended up being removed. So my question is it going to stay in there? And are they going to Fiona? I don't know that that's accurate because it wasn't last year. That was a much longer time ago. So that's I understand that issue. Anyways, the timeline that you're proposing is not right. But anyways, the point of that is that they don't even want to hire a lawyer, but the money's there for them to hire a lawyer. But then we have these complicated situations where they need legal representation, but they don't have it. And it seems like it's a similar thing to the ShotSpotter thing, Tom, where they don't want more information that would then counteract the information that's presented by the city solicitor who works for the city manager or works for the city manager's office. I know I say that wrong sometimes, and you have to correct me.
I mean, the solicitor is an executive branch employee or executive branch cabinet level appointee. Whomever is in that position, this solicitor, the last solicitor, some solicitor in the future, works for the executive, which is at this point the city manager. So they're gonna. I mean, look. Attorneys in this type of law, right? Not necessarily in a courtroom, although I guess partially, but their job, like a city solicitor, for example, or one of the president's lawyers, advisors, who's a lawyer, whatever it might be, whatever official it might be. Their job is to craft arguments that justify, they provide legal justification for whatever it is that their boss wants to do. That's their job. They're searching to search for a legal argument that fits the agenda. So I don't think the solicitor here is doing anything untoward, doing their job. But the problem is they I don't know what her feelings are on it, but I mean, they essentially forced her to also provide legal services to the council. And, we have a lot of go along to get along here, but the same person shouldn't be representing those two parties because they are potentially in conflict.
Yes.
And also, the solicitor can chime in, can respond to council questions or whatever, but she's not there providing, legal strategy consultations, right? If they're trying to get to whatever, they're trying to get from A to Z and they need a legal strategy to get there. But she's not going to do that for them because her job is to do that for the manager. And I was pulling it up too to see, because I didn't see that. If you got
I just pulled it up. I'm sorry, it isn't in there. They mentioned it, but it is not in there. So it is the legal thing is not in. It's not present, which is frustrating. It's super frustrating that is what, I mean, you got $11,000 for telephone and cable. I mean, you know what I mean? And I understand they all have city issued cell phones, right? As I understand it. So, but that really is frustrating to me, is that, you can't retain a lawyer for $10,000 a year, because that's generally what a retainer would cost. Now, I understand the city manager's outside counsel, which we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on every year, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so far this year, almost $200,000. They are, made sure to be a significant budget item. In fact, if you go to I think they set aside $500,000 or something this year. I guess I could go back there.
I mean, it just while you look for that, the the city manager's budget, they have, now mind you that, there's 11 city councilors and they're all part-time, but the mayor's office and the city council combined, which is how it's done, in most places. They don't call it the mayor, but we do here because of our weird system. But they have the 11 of them. The mayor has 2 employees that are dedicated solely to him, and then the other 10 city councils have 3 employees for all 10 of them. So, add it together quickly, that's 16, right? Right. The city managers, just the executive office of the city manager. Now, this is not, this is not parks, not DPW or parks or police, fire, whatever, right? That all happens separate. That's all allocated separately, directly to those departments. But just the city manager's budget is well over double what city council gets. And they have the same number of employees. Now, granted, all of the city manager's employees are full-time, but I mean, that just gives you, a sense of, in my view, that city council doesn't have the resources to do anything meaningful, quite frankly. You can sit down for one of these, some are shorter than others, but I mean, when we have these epically long meetings with dozens and dozens of items on the agenda, and there might be a handful or more that are substantial items that need significant understanding of to be able to deal with them. And they've got literally no help. Like, nobody's there to do research for them. I mean, as a counselor, as a legislator, you really should have material prepared for you, which you can then, a one sheet or more, that is research done in your interest, not what's being handed to you from the other branch of government. You should be able to have some staff members put together a good synopsis of this for you so you can understand the issue, so you know what the hell you're doing when it's time to vote. And instead, councilors get the agenda basically when we do on Thursday night, and they got to be ready for Tuesday. And they're supposed to be part-time. So it really pisses me off how much they just continue to allow the deck to be stacked against them.
It doesn't make any sense. I'm unable to find the outside counsel section, but I did find the law department section. And I want to say this: the law department, their budget outlay is actually more than the city manager's office. So it's 1.9.
But that makes sense, though. That makes sense. I mean, for the life of me, look, he can run his government. He's in the job. He can run it however he wants. But I mean, there's himself, an assistant city manager, a chief of staff, director of marketing, public relations, director of quality of life, community government affairs specialist, senior web support specialist, web support specialist. This is all people working directly they all report directly to the city manager. Like, it's weird. I mean, I guess if you're trying to centralize control of certain projects, I guess that makes a lot of sense. But nonetheless, so they've got 15 employees for just under 1.7 million, and the city council has 16 employees, and their budget is under 700,000. So,
right.
It's again, they just allow the deck to be stacked against them.
Yeah, I can't find it. I don't see the item where it says the outside counsel. I know that there's definitely money set aside for that, but I can't find it. I don't know where exactly it is. So,
and just in our defense, in case for folks that may not have
403 pages.
Yeah, they have better things to do to look at the city's budget proposal. If you do have better things to do than that, good for you. You should, unless you're nerds like us. But yeah, as John said, it's a 400 plus page doc, 403 pages. This document is so that we can't find stuff at the snap of a finger doesn't mean we're not paying attention.
Yeah, and it just came up now. I mean, we didn't it wasn't intended that we were gonna review that. But anyways, if you go through it, I'm sure it's there. I know that they've talked about it. It's definitely a significant thing. But I mean, again, there's a lot of just very strange I would say in my opinion, Sarah mentioned about this. I think there is a pretty significant group of people that would be happy if the city council became full-time. And I would say that at least in District 5, I know Attell gets attacked constantly for not being a full-time, even though she definitely does full-time work there in District 5. Her opponent, the last 2 cycles, has made that a significant issue, even though he works full-time for the courts department. So we'll see if he's able to do a full-time role if he were to win the race. So I'm not advocating for either. I'm just saying that, again, full-time versus part-time. Full-time is going to be, by its very nature, more likely to be more involved. It is going to cost more, like you said, $70,000 or $80,000. I think the Boston City Councils all make like $120,000, $130,000, something like that.
They are pinned to half of what the mayor makes.
Oh, so the mayor makes like $350,000. Yeah, so they make $175,000. So I mean, that's
no.
There you go.
No. Mayor makes $250,000
in Boston, so they make $125,000. Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's good.
Yeah.
By the way, I think that funding model right there would be definitely a better funding model than what we have now, which is we have a city manager who makes $300,000 plus, right? He's making $1 million over the next 3 years, and then city councilors who make $35,000. I think that would be. I think naturally speaking, with a law department that is 1.9 million, city manager's department that's 1.8 million. And then a city council and mayors that's less than 900,000, they by their very nature are paid and valued as less important than the other two. And yeah, I understand what you're saying about the law department, and the law department does a good job. I mean, there's several people in the law department I talk to a lot. Maybe I shouldn't say that on air. I don't want to get them into trouble. And Tom talks to a lot. Who do try to do good work. The city gets sued a lot, and the city being sued a lot isn't the law department's fault all the time. I would say sometimes it is, but I would say it's not always their fault. It's often other departments' fault that leads to those lawsuits. And our city is particularly litigious. Our citizens sue the city a lot. So we have a high rate of lawsuits, and those payouts cost money. Now I'm not saying that people shouldn't be suing, because I think there are legitimate reasons for people to sue, and I think a lot of them, the city just are unresolved issues. I did look a little bit into the pothole thing. So there is a fund that people can get paid for damages caused to their car by long-term potholes. So they discussed it last year a little bit. George Russell kind of went in on it, and this year they haven't really talked about it a lot. But if there are several well-known potholes in the city of Worcester that we all kind of know have been there for many, many, many years. There's the one They just tried to redo it last year from the border of Leicester on Route 9 heading into Main Street and Park Ave. That has recently recollapsed. The sinkhole up near Grafton Hill, the one on Main Street near Maria's Kitchen, the other one on Main Street that's near the old RMV, and the shelter that's run by the oh my goodness, Salvation Army. So those several potholes that are kind of known, and then the one on Pleasant Street on the Circle. But there's a lot of like well-known potholes in the city. If your car is damaged by no fault of your own, going through those areas, then you can get compensation. The compensation is limited to not paying over the bill, but the bill. Like, so whatever the bill is, you can go get it like like, what's that called? I'm thinking of a word and it won't come to me. Reimbursed. You can be reimbursed for that thing. And it's only reimbursement because that's not like a real lawsuit. That's just a direct thing. It's not like you go to court and
that's a program. The city runs.
It's a program. But as George Russell said, most of the time people don't know that, and very few times have people applied for that. The people who do, there was one guy that was doing it all the time, and I think he got in trouble. There was one guy who was like, every year his car was going over a pothole. So it's the one on Main Street is hard to avoid because it's right near Maria's Kitchen. It's one of the busiest places in the city. People are walking, moving. The street is really tight. It's hard to avoid. But you can avoid it. So if you can, you have to try to avoid it. If you can't avoid it and your car is damaged, then but by the way, if you're going 90 down that street, you deserve it. You deserve it. Whatever happens to your car, you deserve it. I have no sympathy for that person.
I want to address the comment here from our dear friend, and he is our dear friend, Mr. Future Mayor of Worcester.
Future Mayor Fred
Nathan. Settling a lawsuit does not admit guilt. I mean, yeah, but when we have situations like the beer garden, Pastor Rizzuti, in many other situations that are so profoundly wrong, that profound wrong was done to those people, especially in those two instances. Nat Cosenza, profound wrong was done to that man. Both how he was incarcerated, because civil jury found a Worcester police officer manipulated evidence, but then the way the city's treated him since, and putting him through hell for, I mean, he's been out almost 10 years and he hasn't got a dime. When we see these things, especially the first two things, beer garden, Pastor Rizzuti, profoundly wrong. And then the city pays out a settlement because no jury's going to look at that and say that is fine. And then they claim, well, we didn't admit any guilt. They're bullshitting us. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And this is part of the kind of overarching problem with the police department and its relationship with much of the city is there's just no accounting for wrongdoing. It's if you do wrong, we'll charge you with a felony and try and put you and ruin your entire life. If we do wrong, we have a whole department dedicated to covering it up, and then we'll just pretend like nothing happened. And so when you just so blatantly lie to our faces, you shouldn't expect to be trusted.
Yeah. So it is not easy to get a lawyer to represent you in a civil suit. It is very hard. They cost money. And so it is rare that that happens, that you get a lawyer that will represent you. Now, are there ambulance chasing lawyers? Sure. 100%.
But they're not chasing these cases.
Right. But this is if in these scenarios, it's not like you're not hearing of them every other week, and every time someone gets arrested, there's a lawyer that's going to sue for some wrongful arrest. That's not what we're saying. Again, the people that criticize us, we are for good cops. we think good cops are great. I have very close friends in the police department, which of course leads to conflict for them and for me on a regular basis because I've known them for 30 years, their whole lives. So in some cases, and in some other cases, we're the same age and we grew up together. And yes, my background is very different than theirs. And yeah, there's a lot of conflict with that. Sure, that's a completely understandable thing. Those are not the people we're talking about. And the lawsuits are not the result of necessarily bad cops either, but the incidents are bad decisions and judgments that have to be then litigated, and that is taxpayer dollars. One of the things the chief brought up that really stuck out was that he cited the one case where the guy was on the stretcher who got slapped, where the guy was spitting, versus the other case where the guy who was on the stretcher who got slapped wasn't spitting, right? And there was two of them, which tells you that's not a good thing. That means that there's a pattern of people who are cuffed to stretchers being slapped. That's not a good thing. That's not normal police practice. That's not in the handbook. They don't have like a thing where it says, hey, if a guy's giving you an attitude strapped to the gurney, you slap him. That's not what happened. In both cases, the officers got frustrated with the behavior of the person in the gurney. In one case, the guy was spitting on the officer and he punched him in the face. That's justified. Sure. I wish he didn't punch him, but it's hard for me to argue for the guy who was spitting on the officer. The other guy was unconscious. He was unconscious, woke up and swore at the nurse who was kind of down near his legs when he realized he was cuffed to the gurney. And then clearly on video, the officer hits him in the side of the face repeatedly. And then that officer was actually suspended, one of the few suspensions in the last 5 years, and the city had to pay that guy out. Now, that guy did not have a big-time lawyer. He didn't get a lot of money. He got like 75 grand. That was a very small payout compared to some of the ones we're talking about. But he did have a broken cheekbone. He actually had his cheekbone broken, which you can go, if you guys don't believe me and Tom, you're more than welcome to go look up the cases and see the details yourself because they are available. And the city manager did mention at the last meeting that they're going to release the settlements that have not yet been released in some kind of report soon. And he said that this is something they've done in the past, so they're just going to do it. So that's great. I'm looking forward to those documents. Right, which Maria, who has a background and does some clinical work, points out that the person freaking out when they woke up cuffed to the bed and they freaked out is normal, because it is normal. Because if you were unconscious and you came to and you were cuffed, you would probably. Now, Fred, I don't know that that's true, and I would like you to tell me one lawyer that does that, because I don't know that that's true. So Fred said that there's lawyers will take anything with lawsuits against the city. Find me one, Fred. I don't know that you can. Don't find me one. I know some lawyers who have sued the city, but I contest your statement, and I ask you to find me one lawyer, even of the lawyers who have sued the city, that will take any case against the city. I don't think you could find one. You can't find me one name that does that. And we'll have that lawyer on if you can find me that name, and Tom and I will ask them directly if they've taken every case against the city. I don't think that that's true.
Yeah, no, it's of course not true. And there's a reason why it's always the same attorneys. It's either Hector Pinero, Joe Hennessy, or it's Lovey from Chicago, which is a big time human rights law firm. I forget who they represented Nat Cosenza and somebody else too. I can't remember who.
And the Innocence Project did something too. I forget that lady's name.
I don't think that they actually. I think through the Innocence Project, though, once you get into civil stuff, that then goes to private attorneys.
Oh, they were involved in the girl who was. They referred her to somebody. But anyway, girl who
that was Ryan. But he hasn't been involved in too many suits with the city. And look, people love to beat on Hector Pinero. that's who people go to because he's effective and because he has a track record. And let's not forget, everybody wants to, this DOJ report was only 2018 to 2022. Well, in 2018, Hector Pinero sent a file to the Worcester County District Attorney's Office that was thousands of pages.
And
about
by the way,
police misconduct.
I would say this: if Hector was in the role of the city solicitor, and the city solicitor was in the role of Hector, right? Their job is to defend their clients.
Yep.
Right. And so why is it that attorneys in that scenario are criticized, but they're not criticized on the other side? And again, this gets into this unfairness, this imbalance that you see in the way things are publicly portrayed. So, Hector has no, Mr. Pinero has no cases against him before the bar. No one's ever tried to get him to lose his law license. He's considered an effective and respected member of the Bar Association. He just happens to be someone who's taken on some of these cases and has been very, very effective in his representation for his clients. Isn't that what you want an attorney to do? To be a zealous defender of his clients. And so I don't know that makes him. I think that goes to the rat culture thing in the police department, which is that any police officer, whoever says anything bad about another police officer is a rat. And then that kind of tonality is very, very, very present in the city of Worcester. That conversation is had on a regular basis. Officers have been forced to leave, have quit and transferred because of they're being called rats because they happen to talk about anybody who did anything wrong, not just one particular person. Because I know people want me and Tom to be put into this thing where we're only going after one person, yet at the same time somehow we hate all the police. You can't have it all both ways. You can't make the argument on one side that we're targeting one person, but then at the same time say we're targeting the whole department. You can't do that. But anyways, those are the kind of things that really bother me logically. Why does he get criticized when he's everybody says he's won like numerous awards
agreed. But I mean, even before that though, like you don't, if you went to law school and you're going to start a firm or start your own practice, if your goal is to make as much money as humanly possible, you don't choose human rights law. You just don't.
Yeah. It's the worst. It's the worst guy.
Because I mean, you swing and miss, and you could get nothing, and I mean, there's various fee agreements that lawyers use, but I mean, in these cases, especially when you're dealing with people of lower economic status who have a real case, I mean, that's they evaluate, lawyers will of course evaluate the cases they take because they want to win, and two, they want to get paid. Yeah. But I mean, these are tough cases to win sometimes, and you often you end up in trial and you lose, you walk away with nothing, and you just went through a trial, which is a whole bunch of work and typically pretty expensive to do the necessary research, etc., etc. So,
in the case of
go ahead.
Well, in the case of the guy who was slapped, he was homeless, and the money, his mom ended up getting that money, the $75,000, and he went to jail he was arrested that day. So it wasn't like, he was in the county jail. And from everything that we've seen is that he entered into a program. He got himself in pretty good shape and then used that money, and him and his mom moved out of Worcester and they're gone. So they took their $75,000 and they moved on. I don't know. I haven't been able to follow them since, but I do know that he was in one of the programs at the county jail, and that Sheriff Lou, I'm pretty close with Sheriff Lou. He was a graduate from one of the programs, and when he got out, his mom had protected the money, and they went off and did something else. And I mean, can you fault them for that? I mean, I don't know that that's something you can fault someone for. They accepted a low offer. The lawyer didn't make a lot of money because they accepted a small number, right? They didn't fight really far. Whereas in some of these other cases, they're so bad. But even in the case of the Consenza case, which you reported on, initially they won, right? But then the city, pulled some shenanigans to get them out of paying the money, right? So then now hopefully that's going to get resolved.
They got removed from the case prior to the trial,
right? Little shenanigans that they pulled.
Yeah, because what these officers did was so terrible and so awful that the city argued it couldn't have possibly trained them to do this, but then continued to employ them both.
And by the way, continue to use as much as people want to say, but the facial identification technique of putting pictures on a table and putting your thumb on one particular picture and say, hey, does any of these people look like the person who did it, is still very much prevalent in the Worcester Police Department and police departments around the country and the world. And it's been proven time and time again to be a way to lead to false identifications, because the person detects that you are indicating that this is the person you want them to pick, and they often pick that person. And this has been cited in dozens and dozens and dozens of cases all over the world as a bad way to find out who did it when you don't know right away.
Fair enough. Anything else before we get to let's go to John Keogh's favorite part of the show.
Oh, man. Each week, Tom, we get to this part of the show, and I have to defend against your disinformation and misinformation campaign about everybody's favorite section, Tom's favorite things. This is the section, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, which we are openly willing to accept sponsors for Tom's favorite things. You can reach out to me, John at HollywoodFilmGroup.com, or you can reach out to Tom at Tom.Marino at thisweekinworcester.com. Oh, I pulled that out of my brain, right? I pulled that right out of my brain. And I asked Tom some question about his favorite things, and then all the people in the chat light up and they get all involved with all the exciting things in the chat. And so, Tom, this week I was doing some research because our movie Solace that we filmed back in January won a ton of awards at it's good to know that Tom and one particular person are on the same page. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and Worcester MAGA are on the same page when it comes to that.
I mean, if you're gonna have that name, your comments are gonna be pretty good to get on the screen. But that one was pretty good.
So so Solace won 8 awards at Top Shorts, which is the leading online film festival. And so Tommy Dwyer, another Tommy, is announcing each award over the next 8 days. And then at another festival, LA Indie, we won some awards. And anyway, so Solace, a Worcester-made movie with Worcester-based talent and personnel. Everybody that's involved with the film is from New England, is doing really well. And so I was doing some research about some movies, and I ended up with this list because the Rolling Stone decided to publish a list this week of the best Denzel movies of all time. And I read the whole thing. The whole thing. He's been in 54 movies. I don't know if you knew that. 54 movies, Denzel Washington. And so I think you can see where I'm going. Tom, I'll let you go ahead, and if you want to do a quick little research on the side. But Tom, what's your favorite Denzel movie of all time?
I mean, there's so many, and there's such a range of genre. Like that's tough. What's the trilogy he did where he's like the ex CIA guy?
Oh my goodness, Frank McCall. The Equalizer.
Was that the Equalizer?
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking. I thought it was wrong. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, for bad action films, right? Like, I guess it's a good action film. I don't know, whatever. For let's call it a genre of filmmaking that isn't exactly refined, right? I like those movies.
They are good
because he was a badass. But I mean, you're also like, how do you talk Denzel and not even like, Philadelphia? I mean, how awesome was he in that? I mean, he's been in so much, even like the bad movies. He's good in them.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna force me into a one answer, the Equalizer trilogy.
Okay, the Equalizer trilogy. So those are good. So Gene Siskel back in the day, Mississippi Masala. I can't believe Maria knows that movie. What a tremendous movie. I'm a Mo Better Blues guy over Mississippi Masala. That was like Denzel in like a series of movies where he's like the leading man. Anyways, there's Denzel genres, right? And the Equalizer movies are Denzel kills everybody genre. That's one of the genres of Denzel
definitely
movies.
that one.
Definitely that one. My favorite of those movies would be Man on Fire. I find Man on Fire
also
to be
hot. Yeah.
not just good, but hilarious in certain spots because he delivers lines in that movie that make me laugh out loud while he's killing people. Anywho, but I would say the best movie, I think, best performance of his career. It's hard for me to separate from Malcolm X. Malcolm X is
I can't believe I didn't think of that. Like, I mean, come on,
it's almost a perfect movie. And it was controversial at the time. It's one of the highest rated movies ever on Rotten Tomatoes, which is the like fan-based ratings website, because almost no one disagrees with that performance, right? There's very, very few people that disagree with it. Of course, he did not receive. He got nominated for the Oscar that year, and he did not receive it. That was Spike Lee got mad at Tom Hanks that year. So, but I mean, I think that's a legitimate conversation that people should have. But I think he's a tremendous actor, and I was thinking about it because he recently mentioned his retirement, and what does he mean as an actor in the Worcester Business Journal. This is something I've talked about a little bit, and I am definitely tooting my own horn right now. But I'm starting a campaign, a one-man solo campaign, but it's supported by several people. That the city of Worcester, the film industry here in the city of Worcester is gone, and that's because there's no big studio pictures being made. But I argue that it's not gone, it's just changed. And that the Worcester Business Journal is doing themselves a significant disservice by reporting it. And it's specifically Eric Casey. He's one of the writers over there. And yes, I am mentioning him by name, and he knows how I feel about this because I wrote him a letter. Independent film is happening at big time levels. And I would say that Denzel really did start as an independent film guy. And then eventually he's just so talented and so good. Spike Lee too. He was a very independent film director. Fallen is good. John Goodman in Fallen is ridiculous in that movie about the possession, the bad angels. But anyways, my point is that his talent was so good that eventually the big studios couldn't stop him from being in all their movies. In fact, there was a period of time when he's probably one of the great leading men of all time. I would say that, you could compare him to Tom Hanks in the 90s, as far as that age range and leading men in movies. And he's just as good, if not better, than Tom Hanks in many places. I would argue that Tom Hanks plays Tom Hanks in every movie, and that Denzel plays characters. And I think that's the big separation for me. Not to be against America's Dad, because I know everybody loves Tom Hanks, but he really does play the same guy in every movie except for Forrest Gump. And that's the one place that he really stretched himself significantly. So yeah, I think Denzel is an American icon, and he doesn't really get a lot of like hype in the way that you see other actors get, that are in similar ages, like George Clooney, like Brad Pitt, right? And the only thing that I can point to, Tom, is that he's black. It's really.
I mean, so yeah, if there's a cause, I'd say that's probably it. But I don't know that I agree with that. I mean, he's like one of the most recognizable human beings alive.
Sure. He because he's so talented, he stands out against any potential like wall against him, but he just doesn't get the hype, is what I'm saying. He gets credit, but not like the hype. And maybe partially because that's his own personality. I know he's been married to the same woman for 40 years, so it's like he doesn't do any like juicy tabloid kind of stuff. So, like versus like Brad Pitt, he's been in he's been getting divorced from Angelina for a decade. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's like at some point, like sign the papers, everybody. You know what I mean? Like get it over with.
yeah. Just a
That
couple,
kind of stuff.
couple other notables. Ricochet back in the day.
Ricochet, great
Um,
flick.
The Hurricane was excellent.
Reuben Carter, he got ripped for that too. Like got got all cut up and like he looked like a boxer in that.
Yeah, yeah. Glory, for the love of God. Forgot he was
That
even
was
in
his
that.
first Oscar was for Glory.
Yeah. American Gangster was excellent. I mean, you know, and these are just excellent films he was in. He's excellent. I mean, has he ever been bad at anything? I don't think so.
I don't know. I mean, I think that there's some movies early on when you could say that he was still like
Sure.
growing into what we would know. And there's been some movies where they didn't give him a lot to do, like the James Patterson movie when he's like a cripple in the chair and he's like
Yeah.
talking to like that. They didn't give him anything to do. They just kind of had him in a chair the whole time. So that was weird. But no, he's a tremendous actor. And his B movies are great. Like the one where he's like the cop in Miami, like he's like on an island or something like that, and he has and like he's like he's getting framed for a murder and he has to like go through it. That Eva Mendes is in that movie with him. It's just a tremendous movie. The one where he time travels like back 3 days. That one's another one that's just nuts. But the other thing that sticks out to me is he regularly is in Shakespeare related films, which you just don't see a lot anymore. And then he often brings his own roles where he was on Broadway to the screen, like he did with Fences. So Fences is a tremendous play that he ended up bringing to screen where he directed himself and then starred in Fences the movie. If you haven't ever seen Fences the movie, I go see it just for the conversation between him and his oldest son at the end of the movie is a masterclass in acting. It's tremendous. There's a line that he says to the son where he's like, me and your mother worked it out. And it is unbelievable. It is pure Denzel, and it is great living in the character. So he's an icon. And I thought that maybe every once in a while I would do something like this. Well, bring up kind of an icon of an actor or of an artist of some kind, and see how much Tom knows about him. Right in Tom's favorite things.
Just a couple anecdotal things. There's a great clip on YouTube or whatever of it's like a sit down with Jamie Foxx and Denzel, and Jamie Foxx does an impression of Denzel. It's absolutely hysterical. And there's
he makes
also
fun of himself too. That's always good.
Yeah, and there's also oh God, how am I going to forget his name? Old roast comedian passed away. The original roast comedian. He was in Casino.
I don't know. My brain is turned off.
Oh God, why can't I think of his name? He was I mean he was older. I can't think of it, but there's a clip of Denzel with him on either Tonight Show, either on Leno or Letterman, and he has Denzel absolutely belly laughing on the stage. It is fantastic. Why can't I think of his name?
The guy who used to the White House stuff.
Yeah.
Oh man, my brain won't tell you the name, but I know who you're talking about.
Rickles, for the love of God.
Who?
Don Rickles.
Don Rickles, yes.
But yeah, so they're both, they just happened to be on the same night. And so it must have been Letterman, right? Because Letterman kept the people on stage. They just moved over. I don't remember. It was one of them. But, and so Rickles is on after Denzel, and it is just priceless. If you don't know who Don Rickles is, get your YouTube on.
Yes. I want to say this real quick. Not this Thursday, but the following Thursday, I'm doing a fundraiser for the movie we just finished, Old Friends, which is with the local actress Allison Rothwell. The fundraiser is in Norton, Massachusetts, and we got Maddie Smith from Wild and Out to come out. to it. It's not really a comedy show. It's more a fundraiser than a comedy show, but she's going to do a set for the crowd there. There is very limited tickets. There's only 150 seats in the whole place. So if you want that, go to HollywoodFilmGroup.com, click on Old Friends, and you can see if you want to come. And if you want to support any of the movies, go on the website and check it out. Go on HollywoodFilmGroup.com. Tom and I sometimes cover movie stuff on This Week in Worcester. And remember, I've been saying this the last couple of weeks. Please go read the articles, share the podcast, and help us spread, logical, honest, and accountable journalism in the city of Worcester, where we try to approach, being journalists the way that you're supposed to. It's a thing. It's a thing, guys. It's a thing.
Yeah, and everybody knows Maddie Smith from that TV show Wild 'N Out, which she's great on that. But I think far fewer people have seen her perform on stage as just doing stand up, and she crushes. She crushes.
Yes, she crushes. If you haven't watched her podcast, Madhouse, it's nuts. It's absolutely bonkers.
She's a little crazy.
Yeah. Oh, and then, I know the last thing is this. I know some people have been asking me that Manny hasn't been doing a lot of stuff on camera. That's because Manny has a job. I can't tell you what the job is because he has a special job that he's doing. And but there are several shows coming up. And then, of course, you'll see Manny in the community events coming up over the next few weeks. And then Friday, last thing, Tom, last announcement. On Friday, the team from Super Pie, which was the movie I directed, a comedy short that we did a couple years ago. It won an award. I don't know how. at the Foxborough Short Film Festival. And so it was a movie entirely filmed in Worcester at Baylands Casa de Pan on Main Street, right at the corner of Clark University. We did a little comedy short there just a few years ago. The movie's only about 7 minutes long. After Foxborough on Friday, where we're gonna I can't tell you, but I know some things that might happen that day. We're gonna release the movie for $1. So you'll be able to get the movie for $1. That's our commitment to the city of Worcester. We're trying to do stuff very cheaply and trying to also make sure that the artists who do these things get something. So $1.
No doubt.
Expect an announcement about that in the next week or so.
Awesome. All right, kids, thank you for joining in, participating in the chat, watching, listening, however you may intake. We will indeed try to screw it up less next week.
That's right.
Until then,